Hello, good morning. It is Tuesday, October 29th. It's almost spooky day. And I just realized I'm wearing the same hoodie that I was yesterday, but that's okay. Hoodies are like jackets. You can wear them a few days in a row. I am Rob, aka that developer dad. And yeah, we're building apps. So far, over the past couple of weeks, almost a week and a half, we have been, or I have been, working on designing an admin system for the DM's familiar. And the reason I need that is because I'm going to be using an online payment processor, and people are going to be able to sign up basically at any point in time, any time of the day, any day of the week. And I don't want to have to get an email and log into my systems to set up a new user at 3 in the morning on a Friday night or something like that. So I want to automate those tasks that will have to be done manually. I don't know why my robot is trying to look out the window. I'm over here, robot. Hey. Hello. Come look at me. There we go. That's better. Silly robot. So, I did a whole lot of design, and I'm not done with the design yet, but I got into the ValidationEngine concept mid last week and realized that I really needed a utility module that would be able to dynamically rehydrate from just data a sets of rules that would be run against the different objects in this admin system, and evaluate those rules and help me determine whether or not an incoming alteration was valid for the type of alteration that was going to be made, and so on and so forth. Basically, just making sure that a change to somebody's subscription, that the request for that particular kind of change makes sense for the current state of that person's subscription and account and stuff like that. So I created a rules engine, and I spent probably Thursday and Friday writing the initial code. And then yesterday I got all of the unit tests done and turned it into a standalone repository. And now I want to take that work and extend it into the concept of validation. And I want to do this as generically and non-domain centric as I possibly can. So we're going to go into GitHub, and we're going to stand up a new project in this repository. And I just want to use, I think Kanban works. Yeah, that's fine. That'll work. And validation engine project. And let's create it. All right, to do. Create an assembly that describes an access, a resource access. Oh, come on. What even? It describes a resource access component that retrieves sets of rule objects from storage. And we're going to convert this to an issue. Status to do, we're going to assign me And estimate, convert to issue, in components rules, and we need to give this a description. Edit, and we need an assembly that contains an interface and DTO class that can be implemented within a variety of storage technologies. This particular assembly will contain only the contracts that describe a rules access component and no implementations. Those implementations will be created as other assemblies as different technologies are identified. Different storage technologies are identified as desirable. Save. Okay. Define the behavior of a validation engine component. Implement that behavior in a validation component assembly. Validation engine. Okay. Convert it to an issue on components rules. Edit. And a validation engine is a component that exists as a dependency of various manager components. It obtains collections of rules for determining whether instances of classes defined by our system with a capital S are in a correct state for various operations defined by our system. That is to say, the validation engine component must be generic in that it can accept any arbitrary type upon which it will act. It must be able to access the rule definitions that apply to that type. Those rule definitions must be organized into groups of applicability. Those groups are identified by the name of the activity that is to be that the system object is participating in. And yes, I know I'm ending that sentence with a preposition, but whatever. Normally, manager will act upon a primary system type in its use cases, but other secondary types may be affected by these processes. Therefore, the validation engine must be able to load sets of rules for a variety of types. As the rules execute, if a rule passes, no further action should be taken. If a rule fails, the validation engine should add should collect these failures and return them to the calling manager component upon completion of the rule set. These failures should identify the property that was deemed invalid and a brief description of what was invalid. Yeah. The validation engine should not directly alter the state of the object under inspection rather return that original object and the collection of property errors to the caller, to the invoking component. And this is all very vague. Well, no, that's pretty darn specific. But it's very plain language. And implement the behavior, edit. There is already a C# project added to the solution called validation. I think I called it devdad.ValidationEngine. Will do the work in there. Interfaces. iValidator. Classes. Public iValidator. Internal iValidation. Oops, didn't want to do that. Exposes a single method that accepts an instance of generic type T and an optional activity identifier. It runs a list of rules against that instance. The rules are the list contains the rules that are appropriate for the activity being performed on the loopback's being a schmuck. Hang on. Jinkies, Scoob. I'm gonna have to turn off my background music for the rest of this stream because I had to update loopback, and I guess I need to re-enter my license key. Lame. Alright, runs a list of rules against that instance. The list contains the rules that are appropriate for the activity being performed on the instance. It returns an object that carries the instance as a payload and a collection of property errors that were identified by the rule set. Cool. Internal IValidation rule. Exposes an execute method it might not need to be, this might not need to be an interface. Validation rule. This guy's going to be internal. Requires an instance of ISimpleRule a type identifier for the subject of the rule, an activity context identifier and a short string that describes the nature of the rule that can be added as an error message to a collection of property errors. And I was originally thinking that I could inherit from the RulesUtility.rule class, but because that's internal, I think I'm just gonna cause ValidationRule to have an instance of a ISimpleRule. And my wife just set a small plate of homemade bacon beside me, and the smell of it is absolutely just tempting because I haven't eaten anything yet today because I'm a dummy. So internal validation rule, I feel like so it needs an instance of ISimpleRule. It doesn't really need a type identifier or an activity context identifier, because we can use those as the keys to the dictionary of validation rules that we're going to hold. Public? Yeah, I think public. Validator. Let's preview this. Make sure I'm formatting my markdown correctly. I am. Good. Okay. Implements IValidator. And has an internal dictionary of rule sets. Rule set is a conceptual term that describes a simple IEnumerable of ISimpleRule implementations. Pop out to the front of the line. Whoops. Is keyed on dictionary is keyed by a string formatted as subject type name pipe. Is that a pipe? It's not a pipe. That's a pipe. Activity context. The value of each dictionary entry is a IEnumerable of No, it's an IEnumerable of ValidationRule. Hack. This dictionary is loaded from a rules access is populated to be populated from a rules access component that is injected into the validator at runtime. Yeah. Okay, so properties on ValidationRule. Thinking. I'm starting to think about the code at this point. I really oughtn't do that. Exposes an execute method that returns a Boolean value indicating the pass fail status of the subject for the rule, subject of the rule, optionally, not optionally, also returns also may return a nullable property error as an out parameter. Public bool execute t subject out property error nullable error. That's the signature for the validation rule. Yeah. Okay. I think that's about all I want to do there. Now what this does is it allows us to extend the rule concept without actually altering the rule's code. And we're basically using a decorator pattern here. We're not directly inheriting from the rule type. We're just adding and enhancing the functionality of SimpleRule. And I kind of like that because it keeps things nice and cohesive and stable. So let's dive in. I'm gonna move this guy down. So we've defined the behavior of ValidationEngine component. I want to move this to the top. Move this up here. We're not going to worry about the resource access component yet. So define the behavior of a ValidationEngine component. I believe that's done in the description of this thing. Implement the behavior. We need to convert this to an issue. I thought I had already, but I guess not. And I'll just assign me. Here we go. I'm going to pull this over. Boop. Very good. So, time to go to the Finder. And let's go ahead and open this guy in VS Code. Find devices on local networks. Yeah, okay, fine. You're allowed. Okay, docs source. Boop. And I've got some changes up there in GitHub that I want to sync. RulesUtility, tests, ValidationEngine. ValidationEngine needs to be deleted. But before I do that, what's in here? Nothing. Good. First thing I want to do is is create a new branch from main. The branch name is going to be feature / create validation engine component. There we go. Good. And we're on that branch. I'm going to get rid of this .github folder in the source because that doesn't belong there. And let's just go ahead and delete that outright. Smell you later. That was an experiment I was doing with Copilot workspaces earlier this morning, and that experiment just failed miserably. We're going to delete ValidationEngine because it doesn't need to be there. And I'm actually going to go ahead and commit these changes right the frick now. Deletes, removes some unwanted folders and projects. Commit. Boop. All right. So inside devdad.validationEngine, we can close the source control folder for now. I have got my iValidator, T, payload, the activity context, and it returns a validation result of T, validates that instance as it's coming in. Yeah. Cool, huh? Our validator, it takes in the validation result of T, payload, activity context, bare bones stuff here. And for some reason, GitHub Copilot is a little slow on the uptake this morning, but that's okay. I'll just do this. Public validator. Save. And we are going to have a private read-only dictionary keyed on string that has a collection validation rule. Now, it doesn't like that very much because it doesn't know what a validation rule is. So let's see what the automatic fixing thing does. Generate class validation rule. Let's do it. Bonk. No. X. New file. I am such a goose. Open solution. Hey, what's up, Austin? Here we go. Now I could say new file. That is a class, and it is a oh, yeah. Registering the domain is the fun part. Setting up DNS sucks. Setting up DNS is one of my least favorite things I've discovered because it's so opaque. You know what I mean? Like, if you're not a DNS expert, like C names and A records and all of this stuff, like, what does any of this nonsense mean? Excuse me. So we need a private read-only ISimpleRule rule private read-only string failure message. Yeah, that too. Yeah, I am not a DNS expert. I deal with it as infrequently as I possibly can. Just because it's weird, man. So we've got a public read-only string of ISimpleRule. We're accepting a failure message. And public bool execute and it needs to be execute t subject and out property error. It is not rule.apply. Silly goose. It's rule.execute on the subject. Possible null reference, okay. Property error. Now, I am going to add a private const string. Subject is null. Error equals cannot validate a null subject instance. New property error, and this is complaining about something. Let's take a look at property error. Property name and error message. Subject instance. There we go. Furthermore, if type of t dot name is not equal to the rule dot subject type name, and I need to add that as a property to ISimpleRule. Go to definition. String. Subject type. Name. And is just going to have a get. It's going to be a read-only property. Save. Now I need to come up to RulesUtility and extend rule and collection rule. So we've got public v baseline, public expression, public bool execute. I need to add a public string, and its rule applies to is my type and name. There we go. So there's that, and I'm going to have to grab this, add it to my collection rule, expression, execute. There we go. Save. Error equals new property instance. All right, there we go. And the rule also needs to expose string subject property name as a get. I'm going to come in here and add public string subject property name becomes property name. I don't need that. What a silly thing I did. Get rid of it. Oh, wait, I do need it on there. String. And I'll just call it property name. There we go. Rule dot property name. And we're going to apply the failure message. Good. Excuse me. And that's going to return our result. So now our validator has a collection of these validation rules. String rule set key, and I'm gonna, instead of rules, I'm gonna call it rule sets. Equals string interpolation, a thing, and a pipe, and another thing. And we're going to say activity context all. And we're going to say type of t dot name, and that'll generate the rule set key for this dictionary. IEnumerable of validation rules. Rule set equals sets dot try get value, excuse me, try get value, rule set key out, list validation rule rules, list dot empty. Can we do that? ValidationRule. IEnumerable dot empty. IEnumerable doesn't have a oh yeah, I bet this is it. So this is a nifty little trick. When it works. Yeah, okay. It doesn't like that. There we go. Rule sets dot try get value. Yeah. And if, because this is Boolean. Call this rule set. I'm not particularly in love with what Copilot suggested there, but I'm going to step away for like a quick minute, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about and then sort this out. I'll be right back. Okay, so we got to return a new validation rule. Validation result of T. R.execute. Yeah. That's not what is going to happen here. And this isn't going to happen either. I don't like that at all. Now, validation result of T equals new validation result of T payload. What are you complaining about? What's this nonsense? Public class, string error message. There is none of that. T payload is valid, errors. There. We needed that. Forgot to add that method yesterday. New validation result of T with the payload. Result. Return the result. Result dot add error. New property error. Subject instance. No rules have been defined for the activity context on type period type of T dot name. Save. Do I want to add a discriminator between an actual error that says stop the process or a warning that says, yeah, you might want to look at this later, kind of thing? And I think I want to go to the definition of property error. Public. I'm going to do this as an object. Severity. Get set. Severity equals, we'll hit that in a second. And public enum property error severity, and it's just going to be error and warning. Applies to property errors that signal a process should be halted due to invalid subject state applies to errors that should be logged as potential issues, but should not halt the use case execution. So save that, and we're not going to use object for that. We're going to use that. That, and it's not nullable. So we're going to make the default of property error is property error severity. If we don't specify that it's a warning, we're going to assume it's an error. Let's come out to validation results. Errors.count, where E dot severity equals error. Save. Yeah. Over on the validator class, new property error, subject instance. We'll add a new line to this. Actually, let's just go ahead and do this. I like to have those all nice and aligned. There we go. Yeah, that works. Okay. And this actually doesn't want to be an error. It wants to be a warning. So if our rule set, if we have a rule set for that rule set key that we've just constructed, we need to execute that rule set. So for each ISimpleRule in, oh wait, ValidationRule in rule set if the rule executes to false, and if error is not equal to null, save. And that's a whole lot of nesting, but whatever. Yeah. And that is sort of the guts of the validator. Now, our rule sets aren't populated. That's going to be a bit of a problem. But we're going to start working on solving that this afternoon. To do, we need to populate the rule sets with rule definitions that come from bunch of question marks. We'll use 4 question marks. And implements the basic logic for the validation engine. Commit. Save all and commit changes. Let's push this stuff up. Let's go ahead and publish this branch. And we'll take a look at GitHub. Where are we? Here we are. I will come out to, I don't want to look at projects, I want to look at the repositories. I want to look at this one. And we've got branches. This app, or this add, build, test workflow, that's got to go. It's zombied. Trying to get a CI/CD pipeline built for this thing. And GitHub Actions are being a pain in the neck, as they always are. But here's our create validation engine component. And I don't have any CI/CD, as I said, but it's up there. So if I get hit, if my house gets hit by a meteor, somebody will be able to access this code that I've started working on. And let's just run all of our tests, even though they're not against the validation engine. But this will also run our build. So if the build fails, the tests won't run. And all of our tests are shiny and happy. So cool. I think we've had ourselves a productive morning session. And we've got a clear path for this afternoon. So I'm going to go eat this plate of bacon that's been sitting next to me for the last better part of an hour, and it's probably gotten a little chilly. So yeah, but that's okay. It's delicious. It's homemade. And yeah, so I'll be back at about 1 p.m. Eastern time. We'll work up how we are going to retrieve these rule sets. I'll probably just do, pardon me, a hard-coded rules access implementation inside the sample console. As far as, demonstrating the semantics of using it and getting it working with the validator here in this component. And then I think once I've got that sorted out, I think it'll be time to pull this or set this aside and go back to designing the other components for this admin system I'm building. But I do want to get this validator in place. And so just before I go, I want to talk about this ValidationRule class. So it executes, right? And it returns, maybe, a property error. Now, what it's doing is it's just wrapping this simple rule, and it's doing some null checking and some type compatibility checking and all of that good stuff. And then executing the rule, and if the rule returns true, it doesn't worry about anything. If it returns false, it creates this new property error that's returned as an output parameter. Now we could create, in a different assembly of course, another kind of rule wrapper that instead of this rule wrapper having a failure message, could have some method pointer to execute when the rule fails. We could even add a method pointer to execute when the rule succeeds. And then we would have a collection or a sequence of these rules that evaluate, execute. We could take these simple rules and turn them into collections of collections, where the collection of rules could be, say, any of these are true, or all of these are true, and that gives us or parameters or ANDed parameters. And then we can combine those groups and evaluate out that way. And this has got a huge amount of flexibility as far as ways we can apply this concept. I'm not going to say that we're going to implement all of those different things in this project, but the flow control rule is something that I'm thinking about, because I feel like it could be exceptionally powerful and exceptionally handy for some other applications I have for this idea at some point in the future. If I get there and I determine I need it, I'll implement then. Otherwise, I'm just gonna leave that as a thing for you to chew on your own. So cool. This has been a good session, and I'll have another one this afternoon. Until then, take care of yourselves. Happy coding. Later, folks.